Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first 2015 Skillshare of School of Data. With Opoku, our new School of Data Fellow, among the 7 new School of Data Fellows that we have this year. All of them will host Skillshares until December, and you will be able to tune in every month. Actually, every 2 weeks, there will be a Skillshare. And the first Skillshare that we have scraping. Scraping is quite an essential tool and technique to have in your toolbox as a data journalist or as someone interested in gathering and using data. And we see everything about it with David. But first, I would like David to introduce himself a little bit so viewers can understand who you are and what you do and what you're interested in.
Hello, everyone. So as Cedric said, my name is David Opoku. I am from Ghana, live in Accra, and I am one of the 2015 School of Data Fellows. And for my background is in entrepreneurship, software development, biology, but I'm specifically also very interested in healthcare, education, and technologies that apply to low-income individuals and communities. I currently work with an organization that trains entrepreneurs to start their own technology businesses in Accra and across Africa, and also as a School of Data Fellow. And for my School of Data Fellowship, I will be working on data journalism. I'm specifically focusing on elections since Ghana has elections in 2016, December. So interested in working with organizations to build a community and see how we can create an ecosystem towards that. So that's a little bit about me.
All right, thank you, David. So what are we going to talk about in this Skillshare? Could you introduce us to the outline of this?
Yes. So I'm going to share just a brief outline of the Skillshare. I hope you can see now. So today we're going to be talking about who the target audience is for this Skillshare data scraping, and go into a little bit about what really is data scraping. We hear a lot about it, and we really want to understand what the term really means and why we actually do it. Then we'll talk about some use cases for data scraping. Then focus a little bit on the basic steps and best practices. Then we'll go a little in depth with the tools that you can use. And then I'll leave you with some references and resources.
Perfect, thank you. Let's start then with the first item.
Okay. So who is the target audience for this data scraping Skillshare? Well, everyone can use this resource or should be checking out this resource, but there's also a specific focus on the audience for the Skillshare that I was aiming for. So non-tech savvy data journalist. As I mentioned, I'm interested in data journalism for my fellowship, and I gear this specifically towards individuals who are looking to tell a data-driven story and are not necessarily technically inclined, in the sense that they are not programmers or they are not advanced users of some of the tools that we'll talk about later. Also, advanced data journalist. I believe some of the best practices that we will mention, some of the steps that I will mention during the Skillshare will be helpful in terms of thinking about your process for doing scraping and incorporating it into your work. Also, web developers and data publishers. These are people who produce data that individuals such as data journalists and open data enthusiasts use. And it will be important to learn some of the best practices you can put in place to make sure that your data is being used the most by your audiences. Obviously, School of Data Fellows, it may get to a point where you need to find some data for a project. And so I hope that this Skillshare will be helpful. And of course, open data enthusiasts.
Just a point I would like to mention to our viewers. So if you're looking from the events page and opening the video, you're able to ask questions. Just use the menu button, which is like a Rubik's Cube on the top right, and open the Q&A application, and then you can ask questions that David will be able to answer afterwards. Or you will have the ability to ask questions from Twitter. Just ping School of Data, and we will check the incoming questions about scraping. Please go on, David.
Okay, thank you, Cedric. So why scraping? Why would you even want to do data scraping? So first, let's go back to the definition of the term. So I looked up what to scrape is using some resources online. So this is Merriam-Webster, one of the online dictionaries you can find. And it says, to remove from a surface by usually repeated strokes of an edged instrument. And another definition, to collect by or as if by scraping, often used with up or together. So as we understand, there seems to be some repeated process or some process of gathering something, removing something, collecting something. So when you think about the term data scraping, how are we collecting data from different sources that exist? And that is where the term is coming from. Wikipedia says web scraping, and I'll explain the distinction between web scraping and data scraping in a minute. It says the transformation of unstructured data on the web, typically in HTML format, into structured data that can be stored and analyzed in a central local database or spreadsheet. So as we can see, this is taking something that's unstructured, difficult to work with, use, and turning it into something that is easier to use in whatever process you're working with. Now, data scraping, web scraping, I would say web scraping is a subset of data scraping because web scraping specifically deals with HTML format. But as we'll see in this Skillshare, there are also times that you'd have to get data from a PDF. And so PDF scraping, web scraping, and even other scraping come together to give you the big term of data scraping. So Cedric, let me know if I should take a pause and you have any specific questions, but if not, I will go ahead.
Please go on.
Okay.
I will ping you whenever we have a question incoming.
Okay. I think one more thing that I want to emphasize, and let me just get up so you can see my face, is you also hear people talk about web crawlers. A little technically, people will talk about spiders. So what is the difference? With scraping, normally when people talk about that, there is a manual aspect to it. It's very specific. It has a manual aspect involved with it where you may be doing some clicking or you write a small piece of code to do that. While web crawlers tend to be a little bit more extensive. So for instance, Google uses a web crawler, which does scraping to get information. So it's sometimes they can be misunderstood or used interchangeably. But when you think about web crawlers, it's using scraping to get data for some kind of application. And spiders also tend to be a little bit more extensive in that sense. So I just wanted to clarify that in case you hear people using that term. So when should you scrape data? So ideally, in the ideal scenario, as we are moving towards an open data environment and world, we would hope that we'll have machine readable data. Now, when I say machine readable data, that normally tends to be data that is easy for you to get and put as part of your process, automate for use in a later process. So normally we talk about CSV. We also have JSON and XML coming from some application programming interfaces, APIs that you can plug in into some process that you're working in and be able to do visualizations, put it into D3 visualization tool and other things. Even you have data that is stored in a database system that you can query for the information that you need. So that would be the ideal case. But that is not always so. You always don't have machine readable data. You may have PDF data. Some report has been generated by some government agency, by some news agency, but the data is sitting in a PDF. That is not machine readable, and you want to get that information. HTML data. So you see a really interesting article in Wikipedia that gives you a lot of data and facts, and there's even a table that has all the information you need, but you can't easily get it. You still want to be able to obtain this data. This is when you can use scraping. So again, I'm going to give general example use cases that may be helpful to people who are thinking, when will I do scraping? So as you can see, when you're telling a story, you need to start always with data, and then you can visualize and tell that story. And I'll say that if you're running a workshop and you've seen a data set in a PDF or in an HTML format, and you want to get that data for your workshop so that people come to the workshop will be able to play with this data set, you can scrape that and make that available. You want to create some data-driven application, some application that pulls data from a website and puts it in a mobile app for people to use. Even when you think about web data, it's possible to scrape data and pass it on to a web application for use. You want to create a visualization that tells a specific story. You can use scraping to get that information. So I think it's really important to understand the best practices for data scraping. Because it's not necessarily about the tools or the technicalities. It's really understanding what the process looks like and how that can guide you in your selection of whatever tools that I'm going to talk about in a few slides below. Really understanding when in my data driven process would I need to scrape? Do I even need to scrape? Understanding what those steps are and what those best practices are very important. I'll also talk about best practices for people who publish data and how you can, if you don't really have the opportunity to produce machine readable data, or if you already have some data that exists in HTML that has to exist in HTML, what are some best practices that you have to take? So best practices for scrapers. Now that is you when you get to the point you have to do data scraping. The first thing is scraping is not scary. Again, we've broken down the term and now we really understand how we can use it in our process. So just realize the first step is that scraping is not scary. It's very easy to do. There are a lot of existing tools that have been designed for people to just easily go in, find the data they want, and be able to get the information, the data they need for whatever they want. And you see examples of that in a few minutes. Another best practice is to use a modern and friendly web browser. So I will give examples of those as Chrome, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Opera Safari. Unfortunately, avoid Internet Explorer. Again, that's my personal bias, and it may be that the new versions of Internet Explorer are friendly, but in most cases, the top web browsers tend to be better because they also have plugins and extensions that make it easier for you to do a lot of the basic scraping that you want. Another very important thing is for you as a scraper to really map out the process for scraping, or whatever process that you think scraping is needed in. Understand the pipeline, as we call it, where what question you're really trying to answer, what is the overall goal that you're trying to achieve, and what place that scraping play in it. Sometimes you may not even need to scrape because you realize that there is a data set that is already in CSV or some formats that I can use. And once you map out the process, and then you can really understand if you need to do scraping. Best practices for data publishers. Data publishers, as I mentioned, people who are producing data. If you have to have data in PDF or HTML, please maintain a consistent structure. It's very important for the people who are getting data from you to have a consistent structure so that they can scrape information for it. Always think about your end user. It's very important. It doesn't only apply to data publishing, it just applies to everything in which you have an audience. Think about them before, during, and after publishing your data. So now I'm going to go into some of the steps specifically for scraping. As I mentioned again, map out the process or pipeline for your data project. I keep on emphasizing this because this is the most important place to start up from. Then once you map out your process, identify what data source you really need. Remember the visualization I showed before where you start out with data and then you verify or you clean and then you visualize and then you tell a story. For data journalists, think about your process and then try to see what data source you need. Do you need to use Wikipedia? Is there a database that already exists that you can use? Think about all those. Decide once you get your data, what format you're going to store it in. Do you just need a text file, a CSV file that you're going to put on a platform for your users to use? Do you need to push it into a database for later? Can you even put it in a Google Spreadsheets for use? And then I think once you've gone through the first 3 steps, then you can decide what scraping tool is most suited for the process or the goal you're trying to achieve. We'll talk about the scraping tools in a minute, and you know different types that work for different things. And then once you scrape your data, once you have your data sets, there's an extra step where you have to go in and verify and even clean your data, because it's not all the time that you will get exactly what you see on the web page. So you may have to go in and maybe remove some links, remove some annotations that are attached to numbers. I will show an example of that in a few slides. Okay, so before I go into the tools, which will be a little bit more extensive explanation of the applications, I want to I just want to again emphasize the fact that it's really about understanding the process. Tools are important, but at the end of the day, when you know the process and what you want to do, it's easy for you to select the right tools to achieve this. So in the next section of the upcoming slides, I'll be talking about specific tools that are point and click, as you can call them. These are tools that you can easily go into, select or highlight a section of data that you want, and click a few buttons, and it will give you the data that you need. And there are a little advanced tools that require some programming, but just making you aware of all these tools so that you can decide what really works, depending on your goals and your technical abilities. Okay. Actually, before I go into the tools, let me just do an example of a scenario, of a use case where scraping may be necessary. Give me this. Okay. Cedric, can you see my screen? Okay. So let's say I'm trying to write a story about African immigration in the United States. I've been doing some research. I ended up finding a Wikipedia article that is talking about this. It's given me a lot of information. And then within the Wikipedia article, I find this really interesting data set that is talking about different countries of ancestry for people in the United States. There's 2000 data on the numbers from 2000 and 2010. And I want to be able to take this data and see if I can do some visualization to add to my story. Now, this data is not CSV. I can't see anything of the sort. It's actually HTML data, and I want to be able to get it. So I can use the scraping tool. I'm going to use something that it's a scraping tool called Scraper. It's a Google Chrome extension. And so what I'll do is I'll just right-click or select this. And then when I right-click, because I've already installed the Scraper tool, I can click on Scrape. And as you can see, the Scraper tool opens a new window, and it gives me the option to select the specific columns that I want. So I'm going to keep all the columns because I think they look interesting. And then you have an option at the bottom to either copy to your clipboard, that is copy and be able to paste it into something later, or export to Google Docs. And that's the option that I want to use. So I will click on that. Now, what the tool did.
David, we didn't see the new window.
You didn't see the new window? Okay.
Yes, the broadcast, the screen share was selected on the browser window, so it didn't switch.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, do you see it now? Cedric, do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So as you can see,
now
it has exported the data into a spreadsheet, in a Google spreadsheet. What I'm going to do is, let me save this first. Move it into a folder that I can easily find later on. Let's see, I have the data. Move it in there, and let me rename it, say African immigration to the USA. Okay, say Wikipedia. I say okay. So I'm going to rename the sheet and say original data. And then I'll make a copy of it. One of the best practices is always to not work on your original data. So make a duplicate and say, this is going to be our cleaned data. Now, as you can see, as opposed to what I was expecting, where I'll get everything clean, there are some things in there. If you look at this section, aside the numbers, there's this square bracket 6 that is coming from an annotation. So first, I don't need this column C because it's saying negligible data, and that's not useful. So I will delete this column, and I'll do the same for this column. Right, now I have data that says ancestry, and then data from 2000 and 2010. I can do a quick find and replace, and you don't need to know this part because this is just using regular expressions. So as you can see, Google Spreadsheets is very powerful. You can do a bunch of regular expressions in there. And you can say replace. Basically what I'm saying is that replace anything that has square brackets, some number, square brackets with nothing. And so as you can see, it's gotten rid of all the square brackets. And then I can go in and clean up some things. It says more than, but the visualization I'm trying to do is just an approximation to understand what the trends look like. So I don't need to have specific figures. This looks like it's going to be problematic, so I'm going to delete it. Western African, delete it also. Just delete these entire 2 rows. Okay. And then just make sure that everything else is a number. So now it looks like I have a number or data that is cleaned up. And I can go on and do maybe a quick visualization right inside Google Spreadsheets. Let's choose a chart type. I want to do. Let's try column data set, right? And as you can see, I can play around with the charts and name things, make it look prettier. But from what you can see, now I have the data that I pulled from Wikipedia in my spreadsheet, and I can create a chart, which I can even embed into a web page or some article that I'm working on. So I'm not going to go into detail about the visualization part, but from this example, you can see that we took a data that was embedded in HTML, used a tool called Scraper, which is a Google Chrome extension, and was able to extract that data into Google Spreadsheets, clean the data using a regular expression, and then be able to visualize it and continue with the rest of the process. So this is just a simple example of a use case where I did scraping.
Thank you, David. Could you, because there was a little problem with the screen sharing, could you repeat quickly the first steps from you get to the page with the HTML table, you use the Scraper extension, and then you get data in the Google spreadsheet. Just this step quickly, viewers can have an idea.
Okay, so again, as I was saying, we found a data table in a Wikipedia article that we want to get the data from. Now, note that I've already installed the Scraper Google Chrome extension. So all I have to do is select some category or a few columns of the data table that I'm interested in, and then right click. And as you can see, when you right click, there's an option that says scrape similar. This is because I have the Google Chrome extension. And once I click on that, it will open up another window. And the window is where you can select what you want. I can remove specific sections from the left-hand side over here. But the most important part is there's an option to export to Google Docs. And once you click on that, it will open it in another window, which you have to go find. So this is the window, and it's already imported into your Google Spreadsheets in your account. So you'd have to save it in the right place because I think it's by default puts it somewhere. So I went in there to move it into a specific folder, and then I can continue with my process of naming things as a clean original data, duplicating it, and going on with the rest of the process. Cedric, does that answer your question?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. It was very
Okay.
clear.
All right.
Please go on.
So now we're going to talk about tools. I just showed you an example tool that can be used for scraping. This is Scraper Google Chrome web extension. Should be very easy to find when you go into the Google Chrome store and just search for Scraper. Now there are a few more. Well, but before we talk about the specific scraping tools, I think one other tool that is very, very important is your web scraper, a web browser, sorry. And web browsers are very, very helpful. They come with a lot of extensions that help in scraping. And even when you get very technical, where you have to do some advanced stuff, programming, really understanding the dynamics of the web scraper and their tools that are provided to allow you to see specific things, they are helpful too. So Mozilla Firefox is a good one to have. Safari, I love Google Chrome, and then there's Opera. I didn't put Internet Explorer there because I've not really had great experiences with that. Now let's focus on the scraping tools or applications. So there are going to be two main categories that I'm going to talk about. The ones that I call point and click. These are similar to the tool I just used called Scraper. And you install something and then you see a data that you want, you usually select, and then it will get the information that you want. Something that does not require programming, generally. So the first example is Scraper Google Chrome extension. And maybe I can show you how to find that. Sorry. If you just search for Scraper, or you go to the Google Chrome store and search for Scraper extension. Oh, interesting. So this is it. It's the one called Scraper, and you just select it and you add it. It's already been added to mine. So that's it. So that's for the Scraper. The Scraper Wiki, and that's also provided by an organization. Focus on the classic version. Basically, what Scraper Wiki does is the classic version has a bunch of different scrapers that have been created by different individuals, and you can choose for specific applications that you want. So let me also show you that. I go to Scraper Wiki. Sorry. So once I get into the page, the classic, I can say, oh, take me there or browse classic archives. You want to browse the classic archives, and you'll be able to find a bunch of scrapers that have been created by individuals. You can go into them. This one says it's broken. Let's pick one that works. And you can read a little bit more about the scraper, how to use it, and all that information. So again, I'm not going to go in depth with a lot of these tools, just exposing you to them so you can explore them for yourself. We also have, yes.
David, a question about Scraper Wiki. So is it something that we load into an application? Is it that is simply code that we will have to tweak for our needs? What kind of tool is that? How do we use it in our process?
Yeah, so it's a tool that has been created by someone. So all you have to do is, let me go back to it. Usually you pass in some kind of URL. If it's a PDF document, you can pass in that document and you'll pull out that information for you. So you don't necessarily have to program. It's just been designed for you to say that this is what it does, and you just use it for that specific application. So no programming, and the programming has been done by somebody, and you just use it for that specific purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So then we also have other applications that I'll call them API point and click. These are scrapers that have been designed by companies, and they allow you to pull information. For instance, you want to get all the items from an e-commerce site. You can use examples like import.io, Kimono Labs, and then webscraper.io. I'm going to show import.io. So basically you type in some website over here. Let's see. Okay, let's look at the example that they have. So for instance, somebody typed in, or if you have a Wikipedia, an IKEA page, which has a list of the items that are being shown. Let's see this, and we can try it out for ourselves. So I want to be able to get all the items that IKEA is listing. I can get the link to that, go into import.io, paste the link in here, and then it will get me the scraped data that is listing the product, the amount, and everything, and I can download the data set. So again, I don't think this is also a free tool. They have a free version, and you can play around. Look at if you look at the pricing, there's a free version. We don't want to use the data enterprise version, but again, these are simple tools that you can use. We also have Kimono Labs, which is very similar to import.io. It does the same thing. And well, you have to install it. It's a Chrome extension. And I don't want to go a little bit into it, but it's very, very similar to import.io. The last one is Webscraper. Now, Webscraper is kind of similar to import.io and Kimono, but it requires a little bit working with your web browser's developer tools, because you have to do some selection of specific things that you want. But they do a really great job of explaining with a lot of videos when you go to their website. So I would tell you to check it out. And again, I'll share all these links with you. They do a great job, especially this video does a great job explaining how you can use the tool. And it uses an example of the shopping cart or e-commerce site, and really answers a lot of questions. So really check it out. It's not scary at all. It's very, very simple. And I think another point and click tool that you should have in your assets or your arsenal. So for PDFs, we have Tabula. That's another tool. A lot of the things point and click that I've talked about are for HTML data, but you have Tabula, and you can check that out. I'm also not going to go into that unless somebody has a specific question about that. But the thinking is the same. You have data that is in some report or document, and you want to get that data out. So you can use Tabula. You can highlight the specific area that you want, and it's going to be able to bring you the data that you can store in some format. The next group of scraping tools that I'm going to talk about are a little bit advanced, which require programming. I wouldn't call them advanced. They just require programming. And most of these actually are Python libraries. There may be libraries that exist for other programming languages, but a lot of the ones that are common tend to be Python languages, Python libraries. So one really used one is called Beautiful Soup, and it can allow you to get data from where you write code to get specific sections of data, manipulate it in a way that you want, and get the output that you want. We have the pattern library. I'll share links. It can do both HTML and PDF and a few more things. And then there's also Scrapey, which allows you to scrape data. So for those interested, if you later on want to ask questions about that, feel free to let me know. I've worked with Beautiful Soup and Pattern a lot. Scrapey, I've played with it a few times. But they're also really great tools for more advanced things that maybe the point and click tools will not allow you to do easily or do as well as you want. So again, these are just an introduction to a few tools. These are not extensive. There may be other things that I'm not highlighting over there, but I'll say that once you think about your process and the goal that you want to achieve and what you want to scrape, always start with a point and click, something that's already been built. And if it can do the job that you want, great. If it cannot, and you need to program something, if you already know how to program, then you can use the other set of tools that I talked about. Another set of tools is storage. So once you've obtained the data, you've cleaned the data, you verified you're saying it's looking good, you need to store it. Are you going to store it as a CSV that is going to sit in maybe your GitHub or some local file? Make sure it's backed up though. Or are you going to put it on Google Spreadsheets? So Google Spreadsheets is really great because aside being easy to access from anywhere, once you have your Google account and being able to share with other people, there are also some really powerful tools that have been integrated with it. And an example is Google Fusion Tables, where you can import the data that you have and do some really cool visualizations, even with geotagged data. So it's a good place to store your data. GitHub that I mentioned for people who are familiar with this tool, not only for you to back up information, but also for you to share things and make it easily accessible to people who are maybe coming to a workshop. If I was running a workshop and I wanted to make a data set available for people, I may use GitHub to make that data available, and then they'll be able to just download the file from there. And there's also datahub.io, another place to store data and share with people easily. There are a few more other ones, but I just wanted to list these few. Okay, so Cedric, I think before I go on, there are the references over here. The first three are really great articles that go a little bit, talk about some of the tools that we've mentioned over here and some other best practices. And then the rest list the links for the tools, some of the tools that I used. So that is all I have to share, and I will take questions if there are any now.
So right now, get any question? Clear the different tools. I think the demonstration of the Scraper tool was really enlightening. I didn't personally know that this tool was so easy to use, and I think yeah, it's really interesting. Could you tell us about what happens when you want to scrape things that are on several pages, which is a common question that we have in the articles that we publish about scraping on the School of Data blog. How do you manage that?
Okay, so for instance, if you're using something like a point and click tool, and you have multiple pages, that may not necessarily be possible. I think with Webscraper, it's actually possible for you to pick the pattern or set out something called a tree. So that's why I was saying it's a little bit advanced, where you actually walk through, you take one page that has a very similar structure to the rest of the pages and build the tree or the pattern for how you should do scraping with one page. And then you'll be able to automate it for the rest of the pages. So it will start from one part, one page, and then it will do for the rest. And again, there are videos on the webscraper.io page that can walk you through how to do that. If you're using programming, normally web pages that have multiple pages have a pattern to it. It's either they say that the first page is a /1, and then it'll be a /2 and a /3. So you can see where the first page is and where the second page is. And then if the page has been structured in a way that the data is consistent, then you can just repeat the process over and over again. So that is how you'd go about it. Hello, Cedric. Cedric, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so thank you. I have a bit of experience with Webscraper.io and import.io, and the two tools the crawler will, using a few initial links, will the pattern you were talking about. This is /3. He will try to go to /1000. Everything. There are pages in between, and so.
I think we may have lost Cedric. So you are stuck with me for now, but until he comes, I think what he was explaining was that for people who have multiple pages to scrape, things like import.io and webscraper.io can guess the pattern for the other pages that you want to scrape and be able to do that for you. So again, there are tools that make it easy. These are problems that a lot of people have faced, and somebody or some people have come up with tools that are very helpful to solve that. So there are various members in the School of Data community who have had experience with that. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And I'm sure we can either help you if we have personal experience or be able to point you to the right individuals or resources that can be helpful with that. So aside that, I hope this has been very helpful for you in terms of having an overview or an introduction to data scraping. And now you really understand why we do scraping, when you'd have to do it, what it even means, and some of the tools that you can go to when you're working on specific problems. So thank you so much. Thank you, Cedric, who is not here at the moment. And thank you all for tuning in. Look out for our other Skillshares from other data fellows who have exciting things to share with us. And feel free to tweet us at School of Data, or even for people as well as Datos. And also feel free to shoot me questions at SD Opoku on Twitter. So thank you very much. And I will make the slide also available so you can have access to the links. Have a good day. Thanks.